continue on with our interviews. Again, today is November 8th, 1981. This is Reed Park Borrowman. Dad, when and where were you born?
Born September 25th, 1917, at Sugar, Idaho.
Not Sugar City?
No, they call it Sugar City, but I understand that actually the correct name of the town is Sugar. It was the name Sugar, and they just picked up the name City.
I see.
Perhaps I've got it wrong, but if I do have it wrong, it was taught wrong.
Let's see, your parents are
Loris Park Borrowman and Violet Mary Norton Borrowman.
What are as you think back to your father, what comes to mind?
Well, he was a great person to kid people. He liked to tease. And for example, when we were little bitty kids, he'd tease us about this or about that. He did it in a cheerful way, in a manner that we knew exactly that he was teasing us and everything. He had a lot of fun with us. And he was quite a practical joker with people around the community as well as in our own family. He also was a strong believer in what he became a part of. For example, once he joined the church and became active in the church, then he was active, and he strongly believed it and was willing to go to any extent, I'd say, to defend it. Certainly this was true of his relationship with himself and with his family. I remember being quite proud of him because he was a very strong person, especially through his upper chest and arms. And he told us of playing games when he played baseball. And his story is that he was quite good and that he was scouted by the big leagues, and that he got over anxious, and in the early innings he threw a little bit too hard, was showing off maybe a grandstand a little bit, and damaged his arm so that the rest of the game it didn't look too good. And yet he did manage to play the rest of the game, but it didn't. If this would have made it so that he could have been a big leaguer, why it certainly brought a halt to that.
He loved baseball, didn't he?
He loved baseball, and he was very active. He coached many baseball teams throughout his life in Sugar City, and they have what they call outlaw teams. And he'd be the coach and sometimes recruiter, and usually he was a transportation director and all these things, and thoroughly enjoyed it. And of course the thing I remember most about his baseball career was the 4th of July when they got made up 2 baseball teams out of the bystanders. And he was mainly on a team that was playing the team that he was coaching. So when the pitcher came up, he and the pitcher of the team that had a running disagreement, all friendly disagreement, but on one particular type of pitch, which the pitcher felt was absolutely hit-proof, and which Dad fully believed it could be hit by any alert batter. So when Dad walked up to bat line, he got the feeling that he was going to be tested on that pitch. So he was fully prepared for it, and he hit it, and he hit it so hard that I suppose it was probably the longest he had ever made in the Sugar City ballpark. In fact, it was almost completely out of the park, which also was a huge one. And yet, because of his weight and lack of activity, they almost threw him out at all. But he was athletic, and he not only coached baseball, but he coached basketball. And not only did he coach adult teams, but he coached people right out of high school in that age. So that was definitely very much part of his life. Also, he helped Pioneer League and Idaho Falls. He helped them on their fundraising drives and things like this. And they were appreciative. They gave him a standing ticket to their ball games in that latter part of his life. And of course, as you know, Berlin, they fixed him up with a reserve sea ride off home plate. So he thoroughly enjoyed it. And when he was able, he was there at the ball game. And is practically known as a fixture there at Iowa Farm because of his loyalty to them and whatnot.
What do you admire most in your dad?
Well, as a youngster, I admired his strength. At the sugar factory, people were constantly evaluating, especially the children, evaluating who was supposedly the strongest man. And Dad was definitely considered one of the very best. He could lift weights in either hand, and he could do it many, many times. And he was very strong. And as I said also, he wasn't one to be pushed around. What he believed why, he pretty well lived it. One of the things that I remember happening was I went to meet him, and everybody allowed to pardon my language, but this is a direct quote. But anyway, one of the other employees at the sugar factory said, "Who's that little SOB?" And that was honestly wrong for him, because that uncorked person laughed at that ride, and I knocked him out on the ditch. He was unconscious for 5 or 10 minutes. I thought he probably killed him. Anyway, that was Dad. So he was definitely a defensive type person. As far as his family, and powerful, and certainly any child could be proud of.
What about your mom?
Well, Mother was, she was always sick, as I remember. Her mother was had lots of problems. She had the sciatic rheumatism, and certainly I remember her problems with it when I was very young age, of listening to her cry. She attempted to walk, and I can remember moving from room to room with her knee on a chair, because that was the only way she could find comfort. And also, much of the time when we were growing up, it was up to Dad and I to do the cooking. We'd put something on the stove in the morning when we went either to school or to work, and then we'd eat at noon, and Mother would be in bed, and I can remember much of this type of thing with her. But the other side of the coin is she was really a very ambitious person, and she kept her house spotless. And our room was, our home was one of the old-fashioned kind where you had a special room where no one ever went under any circumstances unless you were specifically invited into it. And so of course that room was kept very, very tidy. And she did, any time that she could do her work, well, she certainly did it. And she was a very efficient person. She was able to visualize what had to be done and to do it the most efficiently. And she was really a very good communicator. She spent lots of time with we children explaining things to us. And even today I can do many things left-handed because of the many, many things Mother taught me to do, and Mother's left-handed.
Oh.
And I'm right-handed, but because she taught me, for example, working in the garden or something like that, I can handle a rake or a shovel or anything like that just as efficiently with my left hand as I can my right hand, thanks to Mother's help.
Grandma suffered her first heart attack many years ago, and yet she certainly surprised the mortality tables.
Yes, she has. She's lived many, many years since that time. I have thought many times of the effect that we have on each other. Sometimes I hope doctors diagnose things properly, because Mother's been caused lots and lots of worry because of what doctors have told her. And if the doctors, what they told her has been correct, why, it's alerted her so that she has not suffered further damage. The other side of the coin, if they misdiagnose some of the ailments that she's had over these years, they've caused her endless worry, because she has worried so much about what's happening to her and what might happen to her and what might happen to somebody else. And my mother was just pure and simply a worrier. She just was worried about somebody all the time. If it wasn't herself, why, it was us, and if it wasn't us, it was the neighbors, and if it wasn't the neighbors, it was
someone else.
It was the nation. So.
What do you remember about growing up in post-World War I rural America?
Well, I suppose that we all have feelings about our childhood, and I'm sure that each and every one of us think that they were the greatest ever, but I was raised in a very, very small town, and was surrounded by lots of open country. By that I mean there were rivers to explore and public flower forests, which translated today means wooded areas. But there were a lot of things to do. And as I grew up, one of the things that we did have chores. For example, I had the cow to milk 9 days since I was the oldest, and I was able to milk this cow until I got into high school and took future farmers, and then I was able to convince my dad that it wasn't economically feasible to raise a cow by herself in a town like Sugar City. Succeeded in talking him into selling the cow. The other side of the coin was in the summertime we would have to take the cow to a pasture, which was about a mile north and west of the town of Sugar City. And once we got the cows there, we'd shoot these squirrels. And we got really very good at it. We could buy a box of 50-22 bullets, and if we had less than about 48 squirrels for our efforts, we thought we were really a terrific, poor day for us. Also, we'd snag them midway by their holes when we didn't have money to buy 22 bullets, and then we'd sip out their hole and wait till they popped their heads up, and then we'd grab this string, give it a quick jerk, and catch the squirrel, and we got quite efficient at doing that, and things like that.
When you got to high school years, you took up the trumpet.
Right. Maybe it would be well to explain that quite a lot of my present-day thinking was shaped in those real early days of my life, because I grew up in our own family. Our family, because of limited finances, did not have very many books. And I did grow up across the street from a man that had an immense library, and he had what they call the Harvard Classics, and I think that's known as the 5-foot bookshelf or the 15-foot bookshelf or something like that. And I can remember going over there as probably before I went to school. I can remember being so impressed when Gladys Rich could read out of a book. And so I have an idea now, looking back, that I probably was reading before I went to school, because I was so interested. And the neighbor was really impressed with that, because I was the kid he'd waited for that he didn't ever get. His kids didn't like to read anything. So he made a deal with me that I could go over and read his books, but I had to read them in his house. But I could read any time I wanted. All I had to do was just knock the door. And so for the next several years, I made a real nuisance of myself. And I think that before I was a sophomore in high school, I'd read the whole 5-foot bookshelf or whatever it was. I'd read every one of them. And these, of course, included books like Pilgrim's Progress and things like this. So they were very, very definite in shaping my outlook toward life and how I feel about rather serious subjects. Then once in high school, I got in with a group of people. And you remember that it was Depression days. We didn't have TVs to watch, and so we had a lot of time to spend with each other. And so we organized a philosophy deal. And at that time also, I went over we read many of the philosophers like Nietzsche and Dewey and Mills and all these various philosophers, and then we'd talk about them at least once or twice a week, so that I got quite well grounded in philosophy. And of course, all this time I also was being active in church, so I really got a pretty good basic, I guess, humanistic type education, although I hadn't progressed very far in school. As far as the trumpet part of it went, what happened on that? I went down to school, and high school started we went to high school when we were still in the 8th grade. And I had been very, very interested in music all the way. We had a old phonograph that my grandmother had given us, or that we bought from grandmother, and I played all the records. I climbed up on a chair and wind up the old hand crank and play these records. And so I was really interested. And I guess it was about the time that I was either in the 8th grade or possibly a freshman in high school that I heard a recording of Duke Ellington's Solitude, and that I was cast. So I asked my folks about buying a trumpet, and they didn't have any money, but they said that if I wanted to work in Thin Sugar Beets and things like this, that they'd help me get the trumpet, and then also they'd give me lessons. So this is what happened. I Thin Sugar Beets and earned enough to buy a second-hand trumpet, and started taking lessons on it. And I really got on really good. I got off a good start, and I had enough interest in driving to learn that no one ever told me that I should sit down and practice. It was one of the things that never ever happened, and I'm sure that I would have practiced at least once a day, 1 hour once each day, average for the time that I had it. And the year that I was a senior in high school, I did represent the school in the music contest in Bogota and won a superior for the solo I played, which was called Showers of Gold, and I tried to get a copy of it, but I can't, so I can't play it. But anyway, it was, I found a signal honor to be able to play this well. I was first chair the last year that I was in high school in the trumpet section, and also did quite well at Rich College.
Probably you have one of the finest music libraries in the city. I know you've made a conscientious effort to try to get all types of music represented and to listen to those. What do you think music does for a person?
Well, I don't know. I suppose that it triggers some kind of a sense of something or other within you. I don't know that it fills an emotional need for one thing. Certainly it affects you emotionally, I'm sure of that. It can calm you down when you're had a bad day. In my case especially, this is true. If I'm really tired and down in the dumps and so on, I can come in and pick up a couple of records and play them. The first thing I know, I'm happy and cheerful again, and everything's going well. And the classical type music definitely offers a challenge because of the many things that you can listen for. More like Bach's music, where there's 2 or 3 things being worked simultaneously, or else one at a different time. I mean, there's so many different things that you can consider in it. There are just so many things that it can be quite an intellectual exercise trying to figure out exactly what's going on. So I feel too that it's an intellectual challenge. So, and then I guess you just have to say some things you just plain like and I like to listen to music.
Talk about each of your children. Speak of them, first of all, something you admired in them as a child, and then something you admire in them today as adults, starting with Keith.
Well, of course, Keith was our oldest son, and so certainly it was really a thrill. All that you've gone through it, so you know how you feel when your first son comes. He really is something else. I mean, to the parent, there's nothing ever happened quite like him. And Keith and I got acquainted for probably about a year or 2 years before I went into the Navy. And Keith was a happy little child, and he was really strong as a baby. We both, I'm sure your mother and myself both remember him when we were out in the service station. We had Keith in the playpen, and we heard him crying, looked around, and he'd collapse at the playpen and had it in his 2 hands, held above his head and crying because he didn't know how to let go of it. So he was strong, and basically he was a cheerful kid, but when he got contrary, he was something else. And I remember trying a snowsuit on him, and I and 3 clerks and mother, all of us failed in our attempt. We never did get him into the snowsuit.
So pretty determined.
He determined that he decided he didn't want to do something. Why, he didn't. Maybe one of the most moving things was I'd been away into the service, and I was coming home on leave, and it had been quite a while since Keith and I had seen each other. And so, of course, the thought that was going through my mind was, well, will he remember me or won't he? And finally, and by the way, the folks moved to South Dakota, and that's where Geneva was, in Keith. And so we pulled in the station, and stepped out of the train, was looking around trying to find somebody, and I thought, oh, I wonder if they listened to that or got the wrong schedule and weren't able to meet me. Meaning, when I say this, I'm meaning my folks in Geneva. And I heard a voice coming down the track, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy," and so that's what I remember with Keith as a boy. And then another thing that I remember about Keith as a boy was when we moved to Blackfoot, and we moved into what they call the Rogers. And I've told this story before, so it's repetitious, but anyway, I'll do it for this tape. But anyway, what happened, we moved into this Rogers, and it was at the very end of the street over on the east side of Blackfoot. And we weren't quite finished moving, but the boys wanted to go downtown and buy some candy. And this included David and Wayne. You weren't part at this time. Mm-hmm. And so we said, yes, you could go on. So pretty soon, here they were back. And they said that there was some big boys down there that threatened to beat them up. And what should they do? And so I talked to Keith a little bit about it. And I said, I guess maybe I could walk down there with you. But I said, that would help you when you have to go down there tomorrow, because I won't be able to go with you tomorrow. And sooner or later, you're going to have to meet these boys and decide what to do, whether to let them bluff you out or whether to fight them or whatever you have to do. Well, you've got to decide what you want to do, because you're going to want to continue going downtown. So we talked, and I told him sometimes that people did a lot of threatening, and that actually when the chips were down and you were faced with it, why they'd back out. But then I couldn't promise him that this would happen to them, that they might get beaten. And according to them, they were bigger, that he could make his own choice, that I would walk downtown with him. But I thought that it would be a good idea for him to face the problem and work it out on his own. And so he thought a little bit about it, and then he took David and Wayne and went downtown. And the kids backed out.
Did they?
Just like I had a guess, and they saw that Keith and Wayne and David were determined to go downtown. Well, they backed away and never laid a hand on them. And that might have taught, Keith might have learned quite a bit from that.
What about David? Any recollections?
Oh, David was a pure joy to have. He was a happy, cheerful little boy, and ambitious beyond belief, and he just so anxious to please everybody that, well, I guess we both really, at least me, I don't know about your mother as much as me, but you could ask David to do something for you and he'd just do it instantly and cheerfully and with no trouble. And so maybe we overdid it with him a little, I don't know, but he just seemed to thoroughly enjoy it, and he could run all those errands and just do it so fast. And, I still remember him, cute little guy. He was a handsome little boy too, and he so proud when he got his first job and could make his own money and everything, and so he just was a joy.
What about Wayne?
Well, Wayne was the third one. Of course, he had that real bad start. He had a lot of problems with his breathing when he was first born, and so he had a lot of worry about whether he'd even make it or not. And then he was small, but yep, and he was the type boy that everybody wanted to kind of protect their mother for some reason. I don't think that he asked them to. I think it just was his personality that people wanted to take care of Wayne. So he always had real close friends, and I felt maybe they did kind of solve his problems for him in some cases. But the other side of the coin is he also, in our own family, when me and Keith and David would go hunting, well, it was usually Keith would tell Wayne to clean the pheasants or the ducks or whatever it was, and poor Wayne had to do that, and this was true of fish or whatever it was they did. Why, it seemed like he got some of the real dirty chores that the other boys should have done, and of course this went on without Geneva or I either one knowing what was going on. One of the things we didn't find out about it. One of the things about Wayne, he was really an intelligent boy on the way. He loved to read. And I've been a reader, and I wasn't, at that stage of my life, I guess I wasn't too pleased with myself. And so I kind of felt that it would be nice if I could get Wayne to spend more time in activities than what he was doing. It seemed like he always had his nose in the book, and it seemed hard to activate him, but yet he did take an active part in school affairs and in church affairs, and had lots of friends. At least one, always had one or two really close friends that were with him all the time. And so I think that my prayers were, in fact, they worked out to prove groundless. I wish that, in retrospect, that we would have had more time together, Wayne and I, that really understood each other. I somehow feel that for having four boys, that if anybody was shorted on the amount of time spent with them, it might have been Wayne. I don't know that this is true, but and we do seem to have really a great relationship at the present time. But when I look back and think of the vivid memories I have, somehow those real vivid memories of Wayne, I don't have as many, and that would indicate to me that maybe I wasn't spending the time with Wayne, or else maybe Wayne required less attention, or some number of things could have taken place for it.
What about your baby? Of course, he's sitting here, but...
Well, the thing I remember about you is that you were an almost the outgoing one, and you were really interested in people, and you were interested in parties and things like that. And what I remember about you as there's two things I really remember about. So number one was that the way the doors were in our front room, there were two doors that could come together and form a little enclosure. And you kind of took that and made that as your house, and you'd invite us in and say, come on in, and really friendly, and sit down and all these things. And then you always had some kind of an unusual game going. But the playmates in the neighborhood, you were quite a promoter, and I remember, especially after we moved to Pocatello, about you and Marilyn putting on the carnivals and all the fundraising drives that you had to, so that you could take the train ride to American Falls and go swimming and things like this. And that seemed to be what I remembered most about you. I suppose by the time that you came along that I feel this way about you now. I don't want to hurt your feelings or anything, but I feel this way, that certainly you have been as self-supporting every inch of the way as what any of the boys had. I mean, you've made your way through college, you earned all your own money, and all this type of thing, and certainly I admire that in you. I think that's definitely a commendable quality that you really did a great job of. But by the time you came along, to me, my position was a lot better. We did live in the Parson Street home, and when you were born until you were 5 or 6 years old, or maybe a little older than that. But anyway, our position was a lot better, and before Keith and mine and David got all the moving around, we moved from the Port in the Park to Blackfoot, and then we made 3 moves in Blackfoot, 4 moves in Blackfoot, and then down here. And in your case, well, you made the move from Blackfoot to Pocatello, and then from then on, you more or less had a permanent place. So I think maybe that might have given you an additional boost. And
I think that was an advantage.
Definitely an advantage for you. But other than that, I would have to be on your side that you didn't gain any special privileges that your brothers didn't.
Talk about each of the boys today just briefly. What is it that you admire most in Keith today?
Well, his stick-to-itiveness, his ability to set a goal and try to achieve it. And I think he's a great father. You know, I think he's really good with his family. He spends time with them, quality time, has his family home meetings, and has an interest in the kids. It's hard to zero in on each boy, because to me you all have just about the same general qualities. I keep going back to some book I read years ago about what kind of people would you pick to take on a desert island with you to start a new country, and you know, there'd be a group of you. You'd have to have all these skills that it would take to build a town and to govern it, start a farm and all these things, and I would include all of you in that. First of all, you're all able to express yourself very well, I think. Every single one of you can express yourself very, very well. And you're all good organizers, and you're all flexible enough that you can learn more than one occupation. If you needed to be something besides what you are, I'm sure without too much effort you could become skillful at it, and I think that's a shared quality in all. I think one and all that you all are really great with your families. To me, that's the greatest joy of all. You know, it really makes you feel good to know that your grandchildren are having such good parenting. And I think that one and all you made excellent choices of your companions. I really like the daughters-in-laws, and I think every single one of them are just doing fantastic jobs with the children. They all maintain neat and orderly homes. I'm not saying that they're spotless or anything like that to the standard that perhaps my mother set, but nonetheless they're plenty more than adequately taken care of. So I think they're all great housekeepers, and yet I think they're all flexible enough that they do spend quality time with their children when they need it. And I think that in every case that the mother in the family feels that her children are more important than the speck of dust that might be on the front room table. And I think that's a definite virtue.
Two last things, Dad. This would be hard probably to put in words, but what would you say would be your philosophy of life? If we were to try to find the real essence of Reed Borrowman, what would it be?
Well, I suppose that I could never answer that because I've been working on trying to find out where the real Reed Borrowman is all my life and I haven't found him yet. But I can tell you what I've enjoyed doing, and that is that I have such an interest in everything that it isn't hard for me to be really become interested in literally anything. And I have enough background to understand that there's always more to things than meets the eye, and that behind that front door, there's a whole world of interesting things that you can look at, so you can just go into anything that you want and get a lot of enjoyment out of it. If your thing is music, why, you can find out a lot about music. You can understand a little bit about composition and harmony and all these things, how things are put together, and I mean, you can really go into it. Or if you want to take, I don't care what skill it is, or just so much like the ones I've got mixed up with, like hand loading ammunition. You can set a load and go out and experiment to see how accurate it makes your rifle shoot, and you can try a little different mix and maybe perhaps improve it or drift away, and you can bookkeep it. Ultimately, you can get to where you can really get, well, as I did with target shooting. I got so that I could consistently hold 5 bullets within an inch diameter at 100 yards, and this was done because of the practice I did making hand loads and experimenting to get the correct mix, and also the equipment that I had to do it with, the bench rest material that I made so that I could hold a rifle steady, and the scope that I used on the rifle, and the practice that I'd done, and all this all contributed. And you can get into anything like that, and you find that once you get beyond it, there's an awful lot of fun that you can have. I think that there are two kinds of attention. There's the attention on mine that I like to explore something, and I get a lot of enjoyment out of it and have a lot of fun. And fortunately, most of them haven't been too awful expensive. Photography probably ranks among the most expensive, but as you know, there's a lot can be got out of photography if you want to spend the time and money in it. And certainly I've been delighted that I did buy the camera finally, because I've had lots of happy moments, and I'm proud of some of the pictures that I've taken, and really got me a lot of satisfaction. But to come back to what I was saying, I suppose if people are that way, either you go through life trying to find interesting things you can do, or you can go the other route and see how much you can accumulate and spend the same amount of time doing that. And in my case, I've been the type of person that was happy with the interest, although I do feel that Geneva and I are plenty adequately prepared for what lies in the future. I think that now that probably, unless we have some disaster strike us, that we should have a very comfortable retirement.
To conclude, Dad, your experience with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has been different than for some. Both your brother and sister are not active members of the church. It seems to me that it's been a struggle for you to come to full activity. What are your feelings about the church and the role that it plays in people's lives?
Well, this is kind of a loaded question because of the unusual experiences that I do have. I think that if one were to go completely by the guidelines that set forth in Salt Lake, you know, if the programs were implemented, that definitely there's a lot to be gained for all ages. I think there's a basic there's a basic philosophy that's formed in people that if they'll strive and if they'll work and if they'll follow the advice of tradition and of the church and everything, there's a deal that you can constantly improve yourself. In other words, it gives a sense of worthwhileness to whatever it is you're doing. As I said when I was talking about loading ammunition, by practicing and by wearing the loads and things like this, I've become more accurate with my rifles. I was able to decrease the size of the ring that I was able to put my 5 bullets in. This is true of all of life, and I think of all the things that probably we could talk about. Probably religion focuses more on what people can become and what they can accomplish if they'll set their mind to it, and that it is worthwhile to do it, and that ultimately that you will be rewarded for your efforts. But I think that without some kind of reward, we'd all just probably quit. I mean, if it's only that you do shoot 5 bullets in an inch of wool, well, that's a reward. And a lot of people don't understand that for all of us to achieve, we've got to have a goal. In the case of the church, the goal would be to first join Heavenly Father in the celestial kingdom. So that's a goal that you can set your mind to, and because it is goal-oriented, I view religion very, very favorably in that aspect.
Any words for your posterity?
No, I wouldn't do that. I think that the posterity is, I think that what I have for the posterity, I've taught more by example. I think that I've tried to live the kind of a life, I mean, to live, and I've been honest people on our lives and feel bored with ourselves and with the world around us, and so I haven't been one of these people who wanted to get on a pulpit and tell people exactly how to do things. I think that you folks can take a look at the kind of life that Geneva and I've led, and the way we worked with you as you were growing up, and I think